What that does in a lot of ways is makes it very difficult to know when to move on. And I
Mm.
think it's very realistic to know that some people are really good at certain stages of companies, and that is where they shine. And it's
Mhm.
most important, I think, to lean into your superpowers and where you shine instead of expecting yourself to be good at everything.
Welcome to WITT. Hi, I'm Megan. I talk with founders, investors, and operators working in tech. My aim is to inspire you with their stories and perspectives. Through this podcast, I want to amplify the voice of women working in tech. If you want to support WITT, then make sure you follow us on your favourite podcasting app. Then you won't miss any future episodes. Today's guest is Hilal, a product and growth leader supporting startups as a strategist, advisor, and investor. Let's get into it. Hi, Hilal. Welcome to WITT. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Hi, Megan. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Okay, I would love to kick off our conversation with a lightning round. Is that okay?
Great.
Awesome. Okay, question number one. What's one thing that kills startups the fastest?
Relying on just the idea and not validating it.
Love it. Okay, question number two. What is the most underrated skill for a leader?
Positivity, adaptability. I
Okay.
did two, but I think both.
That's okay. I feel like it deserves both. Okay, question number three. What's one belief about startups that has completely kind of changed your mind?
I used to be hesitant with single founders. And now I think over time I've seen there is types of business models and types of formats and timings where a single founder can be actually quite useful in terms of both pace and focus. So I think that's evolved for me at least.
Interesting. I love it. Okay, question number four. What is your kind of advice to a first time founder or a future founder?
Wow, that's hard to summarize in a very short sentence, but I would say identify a problem space, a specific insight that you're super passionate about. Then really understand yourself and the skill sets that you are missing. And this requires self reflection and build a team by which you bring in the additional skill sets and are able to self reflect on what is required for success. Those two things I think are really critical. And then from there, there's a number of things obviously to do in the path to.
Yeah, definitely. I really love that answer. I think you did a great job of summarizing it really shortly. Okay, question number five. What is your kind of biggest red flag in a pitch that you can't really ignore?
In a pitch or a company. I think if I think just in
I
a
would say
pitch,
both.
okay, great. In just a pitch, I mean, red flag is ineffective communication where you're using jargon and I'm not easily able to understand what the problem is, what the solution is, how big the market size is, and what your plan is to actually achieve a meaningful portion of that market size. These four things should be
Yeah.
super easy to understand, but you'd be surprised, Megan, on how many times they are not. So that's key for the pitch, if you will. And then for a company in general, to be honest, over the years, I've both worked in and advised startups for many years now. One thing that comes to the forefront that's particularly evident today and even a bigger red flag to me is siloed functional organizations and especially technical teams, say product or engineering, that are not close to the customer or don't want to be close to the customer. This is sort of surprising, but you'll see a lot of companies still in the mindset of wanting to just be really good at execution and stay in a siloed area, create focus time, et cetera. But long term, I think that is absolutely a detriment to the organization and success. If the technical team and people who are actually building the product are not close to and don't want to be consistently close to and iterating with customer needs, that will be a fail for sure long term. But it also identifies a fail in the leadership of the company if this is how the organization is running. So it's a red flag on a lot of different elements.
Definitely. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, you can't function without the customer. Okay, question number six. What is your favorite animal?
Wow, this is a question my daughter asks me often. I think favorite animal these days, zebra.
Zebra. I like it. I like it. Okay, and then what is your favorite underrated kind of market at the moment?
Market in terms of like an industry segment or okay. I mean, I think the next three sectors that will be properly disrupted, well, I'll even narrow it down to two, are health tech and climate tech or nature tech.
Mm.
And I think those two are ones to look out for. In particular, I think health will be most properly disrupted and hopefully for the better by AI.
Okay, interesting. I like it. Okay, question number 8. If you could wave a magic wand and change one thing about the kind of tech world or the entrepreneurial world, what would it be?
I think so much because Silicon Valley is really the home and the birth of what we consider today the tech ecosystem, and rightfully
Mm.
so. And I'm originally from the Bay Area, so I completely understand. I think there is this desire to kind of roll out similar playbooks or
Mm-hmm.
really use it as a singular example. And I think that what it doesn't account for realistically is that the ecosystem itself in Silicon Valley presents a certain level of luck, location, timing that is not easy to
Mm-hmm.
replicate. Talent can be replicated. There's talent everywhere in the world, but the conditions are not. And so, really thinking about specific tech companies from Silicon Valley being the only innovators or being innovative because of some specific skill or talent, I think is incorrect. And I think it doesn't acknowledge the reality that luck plays into a lot of success,
Mm.
as does right time, right place.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish we had the ability to kind of weigh those factors in a way that's more balanced.
Definitely. Okay, what do you believe is the most critical skill for a successful investor this time?
An operating background. You'll
An
see that
operating
more and
background.
more. I think it has evolved. It's either each investor has some sense of operational background where they've actually been in a business and implemented things themselves, or at least
Mm-hmm.
they're bringing in operator investors. It's really critical because look, we can talk about this ad nauseum. I mean, advice is advice,
Mm.
right? Advice is literally just what someone has done. Being
Mm-hmm.
you don't necessarily need to take it, and it can be quite difficult to implement someone else's advice, right?
Mm.
And so a lot of investors that haven't actually lived in it and taken on some of the hard decisions and been on the operating side is sometimes lip service. It's quite difficult to be in the
Mm.
trenches with someone and build that type of both vulnerability and empathy required to be a good partner in the process, because startups are hard. You can see that from afar, but when you live it, you
Mm.
really can increase your ability to understand what the needs are, how to support, and sometimes when to completely back off and give
Mm.
space.
Definitely. I mean, experience is one of those things that is just so, so important. Okay, and then last question for the lightning round is if you had to describe your kind of entrepreneurial journey in 3 emojis, what would they be and why?
Okay, let's think about it. So I think first I would
Hmm.
use the world emoji, like the
Okay.
little globe.
Yep.
For sure. I think I have lived in 4 different continents and worked across the world in a lot
Hmm.
of and it's helped my experience and really widen my horizon.
Hmm.
Second, I would say is maybe the rocket ship emoji. I
Okay.
absolutely love it. It really, I think it gives the impact in terms of both shipping and moving quickly, but also
Hmm.
progress, new beginnings. And I've done that a lot in my career. I've evolved and taken on new risks and beginnings. So
Hmm.
add that. And then third emoji, probably the roller coaster. I think in
Okay.
every career, there's always ups and downs, and it's more about how you kind of ride that wave and how you um, think through the storyline in hindsight. And there's always a lot of that.
Yeah, definitely. There's some great emojis right there because you've definitely got the travel aspect, which I feel like is a big part of anyone who works in this kind of space, and
Mhm.
then the rocket ship where obviously blast off for new ideas and stuff. I love it. Well, that was really awesome. Thank you for answering my lightning round questions, and let's now move on to your journey, right? So I would say you've worn many hats, right? So product lead at a major tech environment, startup operator, advisor, investor, it's endless. Could you kind of walk us through your background, your career evolution, and kind of what drew you to these particular roles?
Yes, I'm happy to, Megan. So I grew up in a very entrepreneurial family.
Mm-hmm.
Both my parents were entrepreneurs, and I was first generation American. Both my parents are Turkish and emigrated to the US for higher education
Mm-hmm.
after their masters. And so I didn't have a particular direction of what I wanted to do growing up, but I sort of had a pretty wide spectrum of interest areas. And when it came to uni, finally had to decide something. And I said, all right, I'll just do I ended up doing a double major in economics and political science. And I thought it would sort of set me up for a broad range of potential careers. And I started my career actually in investment banking, covering the tech sector. And it was a very interesting time. It was just after the first internet bust, if you will, the dot-com boom. And there were a lot of new business models being started, but also there was a combination of pessimism and a mix of optimism in the air. And pretty quickly, I realized that I was actually more interested in the companies themselves and trying to understand what was really happening, how they actually operated versus being on sort of the background in terms of financial analysis. And so decided to transition and then moved into more operating roles in tech. And I've worked across, to your point, product, go-to-market, commercial, as well as operations. And I think I've always liked pushing the muscle of working in big tech, if you will, and early stage startups. So I worked across Google early days, LinkedIn, Meta, but also really early stage, under 20 employees, VC backed startups. And I like the back and forth muscle that requires and the adaptability. Was most recently chief operating officer at a VC-backed AI and data analytics startup, where I was brought in to actually move the company from a R&D focused company towards a product and customer focused organization and really build the infrastructure and operating systems required for scale. And I think that is sort of an example of how my past experiences, for example, earlier in my career, I was at Meta where I built products and then also built the systems required to scale products. And then previously built out partnerships and go to market. So a lot of my background has been compounding skills that have enabled me to have a very systems thinking approach. And I really enjoy connecting the dots and building out infrastructure and operating systems that enable scale.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. I feel like, in my opinion, as I've been doing the kind of research for this episode, you've got such a wide range of skills due to the kind of startup work and then big tech work. And it's like the diagram, the T, you have like really, and then it
Yeah.
spreads across. And it's really interesting because you have so many expertise from all of these different experiences. And I wanted to get a better understanding of those experiences through your kind of advising and your investing. What would you say are kind of the most important lessons that you've kind of learned through founders or through operators or through the investors that you work with?
Yeah, I think there's so many things that you learn over time, either by doing and making the mistakes yourself or observing others. And, sometimes you absolutely have to make those mistakes. And I highly recommend doing them. There's no regret in them, but certainly they teach you what works and what doesn't. And I think a couple of examples that might be fun to kind of talk through that I've certainly learned both the hard way and through observing companies in my portfolio or that I support. I think first is for a founding team. This could be specifically the CEO typically, but could be other leadership functions as well. Sometimes we really equate for a founder the company with their own personal life and success. And it can feel like that. It can feel like their baby. It can feel like so many things. And so what that does in a lot of ways is makes it very difficult to know when to move on. And I think it's very realistic to know that some people are really good at certain stages of companies and that is where they shine. And it's most important, I think, to lean into your superpowers and where you shine instead of expecting yourself to be good at everything. And when you equate yourself personally with your professional role, that can be really difficult to discern. And I've seen countless times when a CEO or a CTO, it's actually even more common in technical leaders that are in roles in which they are either not as effective as they would like and the results are showing, or are really burning themselves in a way that is inauthentic to how they want to succeed. And in those cases, either the company is negatively impacted, wherein perhaps advisors or investors or friends hopefully will step in to kind of share thoughts, or if the company is not being impacted, they are themselves. And that, in the long term can obviously lead to burnout and adverse effects. But I think being able to know that is really difficult, but really important for long-term success. And I've seen it time and time and again with founders that are not able to discern that at the right time.
Mm.
So building that type of advisory board, and this can be really loose. It doesn't necessarily need to be a formal advisory board that's sort of paid roles or an actual functioning board, but more so trusted professional advisors that are able to see things and trends and support you in that way is really important, or able to spot authenticity. Because, if people know you well, they'll be able to see if it's difficult for you, or it
Yeah.
doesn't feel or sound like you. These are difficult to identify, but it's really critical because from an investor lens, you are absolutely investing in the people, the founder and the team, alongside the product or service, right? But there can come a time in which you see the potential for example, the company to grow, but it's just not a right fit. Either the founder or CEO is burnt out, or not at the right stage, or not in the right mindset, or doesn't have the right skill sets, and is not able to attract talent in the right way. And being able to step in there is really critical. And then from a founder's perspective, or like a leadership team, I think sometimes a CEO who doesn't step aside when they should, doesn't actually set up their leadership organization, whether they have a COO or whether they have a CTO or a CPO, a chief product officer, doesn't set the rest of the team up for success as well. So that's one really critical learning that I think I have seen really exemplified in the past couple of years, especially post-COVID.
Definitely. That makes a lot of sense, because I mean, we're all human. We're not all perfect. You can't do everything. And it is hard to kind of step down from something that you've been doing for, let's say, like, I don't know, 20, 30 something years. Like, it's really hard to kind of step away from that. But the company is not the product or the thing you're selling, it's the people, really. I mean, if the people aren't there, then there is no company, So I really like that lesson. I feel like that's a really good way to think about it. I would really like, because obviously we're in a new year now, so I'd really like to talk about 2026 and kind of looking ahead, obviously beyond the kind of buzzwords of, AI and all of those things. What would you say are kind of some of the structural or cultural shifts that you kind of anticipate in the workforce?
Yeah, I think there has been a lot of change over the past couple of years. I think anyone in the job market has felt that, and certainly employers as well. One thing that I see hopefully will make a proper shift, and I really kind of see inklings of this, is the change from CV-led recruiting to more of a portfolio. So the portfolio being the new CV. I think realistically, anyone can search, and at this point, it's become really prevalent. CVs are kind of irrelevant because there are millions of ways in which to hack it in terms of customizing it for this ATS, that ATS, running it through 10 LLMs to get to the place where it needs to be. And I think those are all viable and important things to have tried. But realistically, given that everyone has now used those approaches, it's not really telling the story and not really making, imparting with a recruiter or a hiring manager what differentiates candidates. So I think in the past, creative fields especially have usually led through a portfolio. So they're actually showing the work that they have produced in some way. And that is what they present when they're looking for new roles or pitching new projects or opportunities. And I think professionally we'll move towards that as well. The expectation being that you have done something or built something. And what I mean by that, it can be a variety of different things. So this applies, by the way, to non-technical folks for sure in the equal realm. So it could be writing about a particular, for example, case study or work project that you did at work in Substack, or creating a newsletter. These are all ways in which you are able to build upon your ideas, display things like first principles thinking, how you actually think in a way that is really easy to understand from an external view. Or even these days, obviously, the ability to actually build has become quite democratized, right? So what are ways in which you could do even the simplest tasks to identify how to build an agent? You can do a super free and easy one using your own personal needs. So demonstrating the ability to, for example, create your own personal inbox task, a triage agent, right? Or building out a lightweight way in which to change a company that you're applying for's onboarding process. These are the specific types of ways in which you're able to differentiate yourself and really demonstrate what you are capable of doing beyond reading
Right.
through a CV or beyond an interview question.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I
yeah.
think
I really like that. That's really it because I mean, to me, anyways, a CV is just words on a paper. It means nothing. You have like nothing to go off of what the person actually is like and what they'll do in the workplace. Right. I have like a little follow-up question for this. How do you think this plays into education with university degrees and things like that? What do you think about that?
yeah. I mean, hopefully we'll trickle down lower and lower,
Mm.
but from an educational standpoint as well. I think right now in education, there's sort of a yin and yang, maybe a adaptation process happening, right? Where there's
Mhm.
one force and one group that's very anti use of AI and integration of AI into education, and then one that
Mhm.
is sort of thinking, all right, it's coming. How do we integrate it, right? Or being too gung ho in terms of immediately using it right now, right? So
Mhm.
I think there needs to be a blend in between. There is a realization, I think, that AI is not a tool. At this point, it is an operating system. It is an assumed operating system, the same way we moved from web to mobile. Like it should now be assumed. I think resisting or
Mhm.
attempting to kind of silo it is not helpful, especially not in education. So rather, I think it's finding ways in which to use AI, whether again be large language models or agents, building agents to
Mhm.
improve outputs and really focusing on the output and why you created a certain output and being able to communicate that effectively. That is the
Mhm.
differentiator these days. It's not about how well you technically build something. It's
Mhm.
about what you built, why you built that, and are you able to explain the output and orchestrate, for example, the agents or orchestrate the methodology you used in order to produce it. So
Mm.
building that type of flow into education and into requirements, I think would be really useful.
Mm. Definitely. I totally agree. I have a kind of continuation of this topic, which is kind of like what would you say are some kind of practical steps that people entering the workforce now or in the next couple of years can kind of take to thrive in that environment?
Yeah, so I think going back to the what I mentioned earlier, I think there's kind of
Mm.
two things that are really able to differentiate candidates and people. And this applies,
Mm.
obviously early in your career, but later as well. One is the effective communication. And I can't stress
Yeah.
this enough. It's such a differentiator in terms of people's ability to tell a story or
Mhm.
explain a situation in a short, concise way that accounts for the perspective of the person they're speaking to. So customizes it according to that. And
Mhm.
that's easier said than done. It's a
Right. Yeah.
huge differentiator in interviews. And a lot of it is learned practice. This is something that everyone can learn, but it requires a lot of time and practice. And certainly you can get
Mhm.
started with LLMs, but it's more about thinking how to highlight your specific background and experience in a way that is short, concise, and most importantly, to the specific point of a particular question or role.
Mhm.
And the second thing, and I think this is like a broader trend in the industry, is it's so much less about a specific depth in a particular technical skill or language. So especially for engineers, it used to be that if you were, as an example, a Python expert, right? So amazing, that's what you would lead with. You would speak about it. The examples you do would be on
Mhm.
it. You do practicals, you on your CV everywhere, right? And that's becoming more and more commoditized. So the question is, are you an engineer, for example, that's able to understand why you're building something?
Mm.
And are you able to work closely with product and cross-functional functions to understand the why? And are you able to articulate that so that you can blend closely and work much more closely with product than a specific standalone skill? And so finding ways, for example, as you're wrapping up your education early in your career for an engineer or a more technical skill set to take
Mhm.
on more communication courses or ways in which to educate yourself and practice, I think will be more and more important. And then
Mhm.
likewise on communication, I think it's also critical to learn how to, especially for founders, how to understand and validate your idea or your concept. Imagine you've identified, say, a pain point or something that you want to work on. That's amazing. Maybe you want to be a founder right out of uni. Wonderful. But you need to be able to validate that pain point or that business idea or that insight in a way that is not leading, and in a way that you can actually learn about what customers need and validate that it is a need in the market. So there's a great book on this I would suggest everyone. A friend recently recommended it to me and I reread it. It's a short read. It's only about, it probably takes you like a couple hours tops. It's called
Okay.
Mom Test.
Mom test.
And yes, and
Okay.
I'll get you the author actually. Rob Fitzpatrick.
Okay.
And it's a great read because what it does is talk about how people typically, especially founders earlier in their career, will ask
Mm-hmm.
very leading questions. You might have a particular business idea and you're basically asking them, is this a good idea? Great. And kind of moving yourself along to believing that what you originally identified is in fact a need, instead of actually listening and asking questions and probing and taking a step below and spending that upfront time and researching, communicating, and listening to
Mm-hmm.
ensure that what you are building and the insight that you have is an actual need. I see so many people rushing towards an idea and running down that path. And that's exciting and great, but you really need
Right.
to learn how to communicate and validate before you go down a path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because it's very important to have to actually be solving a problem, because I don't know how you would sell something to someone if they don't actually have that problem. So, it definitely makes a lot of sense, and I definitely do agree with you. And for me, because I would eventually like to start my own company, I'm definitely trying to do that at every a moment that I get. So I feel like it is a huge part of being an entrepreneur is just questioning everything, basically,
Yeah,
which is kind of cool in a way. But
definitely.
yeah. We could switch topics a little bit because I want to go back to your kind of earlier career. And you changed jobs quite a lot. So kind of 1 year there, 2 year there. Do you kind of believe that moving around helped you find your passion and helped you kind of evolve your skills?
Yeah, so I think realistically in this day and age, there's a few things to think about when you're building your career. I
Mm,
think first is really aligning with opportunity and being open to happen chance or luck or
mm-hmm.
unexpected changes and revelations throughout your career. And I think so much of the adaptability is what sets you up for success later. I see so many people staying in roles in which they are comfortable, they're not
Mm,
learning as much, but it's
yeah.
sort of a safe bet, right? And
Yeah.
I think I've had long stretches at certain, points in my career, and other times I've seen opportunities to either travel internationally,
Mm-hmm.
take on a really interesting and exciting work or project for a year or two, learn the most, and then see how I can apply that to my next role. I think it's really important to build in that opportunity for, in some way, happen chance, luck, changes of perspective. And also, kind of to my earlier point, in terms of knowing when you're at a point in which you need to start learning more and stretching
Yeah.
yourself, or in which you've kind of shared what you can add, and that's kind
Mm-hmm.
of what is kind of the you've either reached a limit in terms of opportunities at that company, or you have
Yeah.
reached a limit in terms of what you're learning. And so I
Right.
really suggest people do that. Now, there are certain points in your career where may also be at a company where you can change roles and learn as much and change and kind of shift things, and I think that's a great
Mm-hmm.
opportunity as well. But aligning yourself in that way and also taking into account personal factors is really important. So for example, international changes, life changes,
Mm,
children, these types of different areas. These are important ways in which you need to align your personal best self with your professional best self. And how do those opportunities match? And how do you make
mm-hmm.
your overall output as a human being as effective as possible?
Definitely, definitely. Because you can only really be as kind of productive as you can be if you're happy. You need to, if you're making a lot of money, for example, if you're not happy, then it's not really, we have, it's very cliche, but we have, very short lives. So you have to make the most of it kind of
Absolutely.
thing. But it's now story time. So I want to know what happened with you living and working in Russia. Tell
Mhm.
me tell me a little bit about how that worked. How was the experience?
Yes. So it's very interesting. I think I grew up in the Bay Area in California.
Mhm.
And it was somewhat unusual, but I was always quite interested in Russia, and then also more specifically the Turkic countries that are right below Russia. Today's
Mm-hmm.
Russia. They were part of USSR previously, so Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan,
Mm-hmm.
Turkmenistan, etc. And I just found it quite fascinating. As I mentioned, my parents are Turkish, and so I speak Turkish
Mm.
fluently, and most of those regions speak a combination or sort of a mix between Russian and Turkish, or at least most
Okay.
of them understand Turkish. And so I found that sort of fascinating, and I had always talked about it throughout my career, but quite frankly, being mostly in the US or in general Western Hemisphere, it was unusual. There
Mm.
weren't a lot of opportunities, and when I was in management consulting, I had talked about it quite a bit with a partner I was working with. And he said, you know what, one day out of the blue, you're not going to believe this. There's actually an opportunity for a client that we're working with to take on a project in Russia. Would you be interested? And I
Mm-hmm.
completely jumped on it. I was like, amazing. That's perfect. I'm in. And it also happened to work out that for Americans, typically to get work visas in Russia can be quite difficult and complicated. I'm obviously talking about pre-war times,
Mm-hmm.
but it's quite short, it's difficult, etc. And I also have a Turkish passport, and so I thought, great, because at that time especially, Turkey and Russia didn't have any sort of visa requirements, so it was
Mm-hmm.
travel between the two. So I told the partner, I said, great, I can do this, no paperwork needed, no red tape, I got this. And so that started out as initially a 3-month project in Moscow in 2011, right around the time of the first protests against Putin.
Mm-hmm.
I started out in the fall, and as it led into winter, it was incredible. There's people protesting on the streets, and it is so cold that you would get
Mm.
out of the shower and your lashes would stick together. Like, it was
Oh.
insanely cold. And I just could not believe that people were outside for hours like that. But it was a really
Mm.
interesting time to be there. And the 3-month project kept rolling on and on and on. And I ended up basically living in the Marriott in Red Square for almost a year. And
Wow.
it was a great experience, honestly. In some ways, professionally, it was difficult because I don't speak Russian.
Mm.
And so I needed to have a full-time translator with me. And of course, that can be difficult from a business perspective. You miss context in conversations, and
Mm.
obviously, it slows down the pace. And so I wouldn't necessarily suggest it for that long a time.
Mm.
However, I think for me, it was such a great experience. And I'm
Yeah.
honestly so glad to have been there working and living for a time in which I was able to kind of understand and see the Russian culture in a different way, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, really hope for opportunities for others in the future to be able to see that as well.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I mean, it sounds like such a cool and interesting time because
Mhm.
obviously, now we can't really go
Yeah,
and visit, but it definitely seems like a really, really cool thing that you got to experience. So that's really, really awesome. Okay, well, we're now sadly coming to the end of the podcast, but I do have three final questions for you.
great.
So the first one is kind of imagine it's 2035, right? So in, I think that's 9 years' time now.
9 years. Should we do 2036?
2036, yeah. What does your life look like? What does your career look like? Where do you think you are?
I mean, so first off, hopefully I can say in 2036, I knew Megan way back when, and I will have been part of an early set of episodes of a very
Yes.
famous podcaster. But beyond that, I think, look, I've always tried never to plan too far in advance. I really
Mm-hmm.
enjoy and value spontaneity. But I think for sure, I would love to be investing more. I invest in a couple of startups a year and would love to accelerate that further,
Mm-hmm.
and taking on more advisory and board roles for sure. And usually every 5 years or so, I start working on a new venture. So I'm sure there'll be something
Okay.
I plan up and start working on. And then beyond that, personally, by then I will have had a 15-year-old. So I'm
Wow.
sure I'll enjoy getting into the teen years, and would love to have lived in another country as well.
Mm-hmm.
I am, I guess, what they call a third culture kid, British, American, and Turkish. And
Mm-hmm.
I um, really had a lot of opportunities presented to me early on with my parents because I moved around as well a lot as a younger child. And I would love for
Mm-hmm.
my daughter to also live in a different, for her at this
Experience
point,
that.
I guess, a fourth country, and experience that.
Definitely. I love that. Okay, so next question. How can listeners kind of follow along with your journey?
Sure. Yeah. I think, I mean, as with everyone, probably best way to reach me is on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty responsive. And, obviously reach out if you are either a founder who is looking for, obviously, investment or looking for support during their journey.
Mm-hmm.
I especially help either early stage, but also those that are looking to kind of think through how to scale and accelerate their growth. So feel free to reach out to me directly for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, I'm not necessarily like promoting anything at the moment. It's more about I value a lot of community and ways in which to learn from others. So I'm always interested in hearing different stories, attending different
Mm.
types of events, and really keeping an open perspective in mind. So with that said, if there's opportunities where it might make sense, feel free to reach out to me, and I'd love to meet you or join you.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. Okay, last question. How can listeners be useful to you? So what can they do to help you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the points that I mentioned before. I think obviously I'm always looking for amazing founders that
Mm-hmm.
are at very early stages. As an angel investor, obviously we're at that very early idea growth and validation stage. So reaching out to me
Mm-hmm.
there would be amazing. I'm both myself a direct angel investor as well as part of a number of awesome angel investing organizations and have a pretty wide network across VCs. So I think that would be helpful for sure. And then, as I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, if there are opportunities to learn about different industries or functions, I'm always open to that. I am part of a number of organizations functionally. I sit on, for example, the COO roundtable in London
Mm-hmm.
and really enjoy hearing from people in different fields, for example, executive roles in non-tech fields. And I think that can be really interesting to learn from. So that would be useful as well.
Definitely. Okay, lovely. Well, thank you so much for being on my podcast. I'm really looking forward to following along with your journey, but thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Megan. Great seeing you.
Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed this week's episode. To make sure you don't miss next week's episode, follow us on your favorite podcasting app. Do consider leaving us a review as it helps the podcast tremendously.